Alright, I'm good.
I'm Alexander Klein.
And I'm Brandon Hampstead.
And have you ever wondered how the British colonists' view of the native Indian people influenced Indian social structures, and what is the impact today?
Well, our group has, and we have developed a thesis that is the British Empire's control over India and the way they viewed the native people influenced Indians' positions in the caste system, Indians' view on other countries, and as well as Indians' role in the modern world. We have a various amount of sources to prove our thesis.
So the first source we'll be looking at is by Dadabhai Naoroji, who was an Indian political person influenced and on British policies and argued in England.
I'm gonna.
Or should we just
So we have.
The first source we looked at was a source by Dadabhai Naoroji, who was an Indian political leader, and he weighed the advantages and disadvantages of British rule. For the advantages of British rule, he looked at the case of humanity, civilization, politically, and materially. For humanity, he said the British allowed the remarriage of Indian widows instead of them killing themselves after their husbands passed away. This has a large impact on the caste system and the view of women in the Indian society because they weren't valued as much before the British came. In the case of civilization, education was limited to parts of the caste system, but the British allowed for education of the males and females. They also implemented more Indian literature and promoted it. Politically, they allowed peace and freedom of speech. They improved the native governments with their tactics. And there was freedom from oppression and security, and equal justice between men, which has somewhat of an impact on the caste system because men weren't looked at as the same depending on what caste they were in. For the disadvantages of British rule, Naoroji says nothing was implemented. For civilization, much has been done, but more could have been done, and he doesn't specify what. Politically, there were still many traces of the caste system, and with the implementation of the new British government, natives still couldn't participate in British government. And they were also looked at as second-hand citizens as the British came in and took the higher positions in the caste system. Financially, there were new models of taxation and put British debt on Indian government. This was heavy oppression against the peasants and the lower castes in Indian society. Materially, they brought in valuable products and they also brought in railways, but that led to the impoverishment of the country and famines were rampant. That's all for Dadabhai Naoroji.
Our second source was a document on an overview of the British East India Company. The British East India Company was a charter group of businessmen that developed to import trade of fine goods from India to multiple different English colonies. It was formed around 1599, and the purpose of it was trading with wealthy kingdoms in Asia to increase profits. The business was mostly responsible for the British conquest of India, and their continued interest in increasing their profits led to this corporation gaining more and more control over the Indian subcontinent, which was also, their cause was also strengthened by the backing of the English and their weapons that the native Indians could not fight against. Many rivals for the wealth that was ready to be tapped into in the area created tension between many different European and Asian trading parties for control of the area, which led to higher risk in trading on the seas. The company began influencing their infrastructure onto the continent by making forts and trading posts on the edge of India, and alliances were made between the company and local Indian princes in the beginning. But once the British became more involved in India, these alliances fell apart, and the company used its advanced armies to defeat the local princes and gain full control of the area. By the late 1700s, the company was almost bankrupt because of constant fighting in the area. they changed to a joint stock company to begin a process that included more of the British government involved in the control of India. So the courts and laws of trade were established, but the Indian people weren't at these meetings and did not have a say in how their country was run. By the 1820s, many peasants were forced to leave their land so that the East India Company could raise as much money as possible. There was also a good side to this, as seen in the rule of the British Governor General. He stopped the British East India Company from gaining more peasants' land from 1828 to 1836. He also outlawed practices such as widow burning and human sacrifice, which were traditions in the Hindu and Indian culture, which he changed because they were seen as inhumane. And he began to introduce Western education with colleges, and also and knowledge of Western medicine, which increased the quality of health in India. That's all for the British East India Company.
All right. So overall, the colonization of the British in India, relating it back to the thesis, for the most part, British rule was really good for India in terms of regulating their economy, shifting parts of their caste system, also introducing new ways of treating the natives with the Indian Slavery Proclamation, and the Regulating Act teaching the British government how to rule over a body such as India. And Nauroji even states that more emphasis was put on women, even though not a ton of emphasis, it still shows that they carried it out. They understood what needed to happen, and they attempted it.
So one thing that was very special about the colonization of India by the British was that Indian society was already kind of well managed and very advanced for the time, since it had been a society for a long time before the British had come. But to see the British being able to conquer with their means of weapons and their influence, especially on the caste system, because the caste system was like hierarchical, and the British kind of overshadowed that as the ruling body, and then everyone else was below them, kind of as like second-class citizens of the British Empire. And the fact that they ruled India for so long shows that the modern influence, for example, like soldiers in World War I were pulled from all over the world for the British, such as native Indian people who helped the British successfully defeat the enemy in World War I. And it also shows that the British have impacted India in a modern way, because the two countries still hold very good trade relations, and they're both huge economic world powers today in trade and power and military. So to see that the British were able to influence India into a more modern country as it is today, with the amount of people that are in India and the government that is in India, is a testament to how the British controlled and how they viewed the native Indians.